I work with youth with disabilities? I work with youth because if you begin working with them when they are about 18 or 20 years, you can influence them for the next 50 years of their life. Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Honest Talk by Freak Folks. I'm Harsh Pandey. For this particular session, our guest will be Miss Meera Shene ma'am, who is here with us. She's a pioneer in job-linked skilling of rural, tribal, and now youth with disabilities. She was Executive Director EGMM, the first state governmental organization or government skilling mission, then consulted with World Bank and UNDP, and is now a change maker. She set up Youth for Jobs nine years back, which has grown to be the largest organization in South Asia, skilling less educated and educated youth with disabilities and linking them to jobs. Y4J is a one-stop shop for 600 plus companies. This work has won the highest national and international awards, the most recent being Asia winner for MIT prestigious Future of Work Award, Inclusion Innovation Challenge, and the Global Zero Project Award for the innovation in IT and employment. So first of all, ma'am, I welcome you to in this session. Thank you so much for joining and agreeing to share your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Harsh.
Thank you, ma'am. So moving to the topic of today's session, which we have chosen is why we need to focus on vulnerable youth for the workplace. Ma'am, my very first question to you, or rather say it's a kind of request to you, kindly explain our viewers when you say vulnerable youth, what actually you mean.
Uh, okay. Well, vulnerable generally is any section of the population which is deprived. It could be deprived of food, deprived of education, deprived of any kinds of facilities. So generally, globally, the vulnerable groups are women, young persons with disabilities, the migrants, refugees, LGBT, minority communities. So these are people who are described as vulnerable. You could ask me the question, why then I work in the field of disability and why is this vulnerable? Uh, if you look at India, people with disabilities also and the youth with disabilities, 69% of them live in the villages like the rest of the population. And in villages, there's a big stigma attached to disability. Uh, Still, people have not got out of the feeling that disabilities occurs, so they hide them in the houses. And that's why if you look at census, the India census shows that the population is 21 million, but the World Bank and the WHO reports actually say the numbers are 60 to 70 million. So that means that's a huge hidden population, and therefore you cannot do any economic accurate, the economists can't do any accurate policy, with this section of the population. The education levels are low. Very few of them go on to higher education, though the recent act passed by the government mandates a 5% reservation, and therefore 75% of them are underemployed or unemployed. So that's the status of that, and that's why we decided that we should work with this section of the population to skill them into put them into jobs.
All right, ma'am. I think you have given a very beautiful answer. And actually, I have asked this question because I wanted to tell from you that I want you to tell people that what actually vulnerable means and why is it important to talk about it. Ma'am, my next question to you is there are 1.8 billion youth ages among 15 to 24 in the world today, the largest youth population in human history. But there are 67 million unemployed youth worldwide and 145 million working youth live in poverty. With low education and skill levels, limited resources, and inadequate social and business jobs, Many find it difficult to balance education and income earning demands to contribute to household income. My question to you is, which is also the topic of today's session, why we need to focus on vulnerable youth for the workplace?
Um, if you look at it, the CEOs who work with me, who work with us to integrate youth with disabilities in the workplace, they tell us that definitely it helps the business. It helps the business because, on one hand, especially in repetitive tasks, say the manufacturing line, etc., it reduces the attrition and it also helps productivity. But not just this, uh, a common thing which the companies tell me is that one is it's mandated by the law. Okay, so it's a good place to work because the country's law mandates it. So if you make it as a part of your CSR, it's not just CSR, but it's also mandated by the act. Second, it makes your organization a great place to work because the employees who work over there realize that the company is not just making money, but it's also doing something good. Okay. Thirdly, what happens is there's a great cross fertilization of ideas. You know, Harsh, when I talk recently, we have a big mentorship with the visually impaired in our Delhi program, along with HSBC. So all the HSBC employees who participated in mentoring the visually impaired or the blind, every one of them told me how much they learned from the visually impaired as much as the visually impaired youth learned from them. So there's a tremendous cross learning which helps, and these relationships actually go far beyond our program. A mentorship program may close in 2 months, but ये जो relationship है, what happens is it really extends beyond, where both of them, build partnership to help this youth and to take him to his next level in life. So another um, another factor which has come out in various studies, and multinationals like Pepsi have realized that it also helps in innovation. And how does it help in innovation? Because these youth with disabilities, for example, they can't hear or they may not have one hand. So when they need to work, of course, technology helps. But besides that, they also look at the program or the problem with an innovative eye because they don't have something. So that enables them to think, how can you solve the problem without that? Let me give you a very good example. I don't know if you know that how was the WhatsApp invented and SMS. Okay, it was actually invented for the speech and hearing impaired people. Okay, and today you and I use the same thing, and we don't even think that it was invented for those people who cannot talk. Because they cannot talk, you need to message each other, and so messaging was actually made for them as a method of communicating with each other. But today it's common for all. Okay, so that's why, because innovation and creativity happens when you have one person or a couple of people who have different, who are diverse. Okay, it could be youth with disabilities, it could be anything else. Then what happens is there's a lot of creation and innovation at the workplace. And who doesn't want innovation? Today every company wants to outbid the other. These are some of the advantages which companies find uh, on integrating a diverse workforce into the workplace.
All right, ma'am. Again, it was and you have told many important things, and also you have given the example of WhatsApp, how actually it was invented. And again, it was really a very new piece of information for me as well. And I think the viewers who are watching, they are surely going to find this insightful. Ma'am, my next question to you is, what skills and qualities do you think are important when working with the vulnerable youth?
I think that's a very nice question, because what happens is that when you recruit, and today I have about 160 people who work with me, I think it's very important for us to understand what is the kind of person which I need as a part of my team if you really want to achieve high outcomes. Um, I don't think it's the PhDs and the MBAs are which are important. Of course, we have as a part of the team people who have those degrees. But what is more important, Harsh, is one is everyone should have a belief in the potential of the vulnerable and the poor. If I do not believe that this person who cannot hear or who cannot see has talent, has abilities, then I can't skill him and put him in the workplace. So, first is that every one of us should have this belief that yes, he or she can. And my job is to bring the talents out which they have, which are now are hidden. So, that I think first is the most important. The second is, I think, compassion. In fact, people like the Dalai Lama speak so beautifully of it. Compassion is important because it's just some accident of birth which has put you and me into this privilege where we can speak English, where we are in a certain kind of place with a salary, with a job, or an entrepreneur. It's just an accident of birth. But in a country like India, there's so many divides. You have the gender divide, you have the digital divide, you have the rich poor divide, you have the rural urban divide. Okay, so you should have compassion that because we are fortunate, how can you bring the other fortunates to your level? I think that compassion really needs to be felt. Third is it's important to understand on one hand the grassroots people who are in India where the real need is, and at the same time you need to understand companies, and most of the NGOs are not able to marry these two skills. But unless these two skills are married together, you'll skill but you won't be able to give them jobs. So it's important to marry these two competencies together. The last but not the least, no, I think there are two more. One is you must understand the use of technology because technology brings in transparency and technology helps you also to scale and improve learnings. Over and above everything, how do you knit your 160, 170, tomorrow they need 200? How do you knit them together? And knitting them together, I think only can be done if you have a very powerful vision. And that vision should be so small that everyone should be able to understand it. And the vision which I give, which every single member of my team knows, is that a job to one youth with disability takes the entire family out of poverty in a sustained manner. It's like a mantra for my whole team. Okay. So they know that however difficult the work is, they know that this mantra is there. That means what? Whatever challenges they have, the end result of their work is that this youth who's in poverty, his whole family will come out of poverty because of their work. And that image keeps them going irrespective of what the challenges in the work are.
Indeed, ma'am. Again, you have raised important points, and I think it's a kind of privilege today. We got to hear all those things from you, and also I must say that this is something we all know very well, but nobody wants to talk. And actually, you have mentioned the very serious issues, and I am happy that you have actually mentioned here, ma'am. What we are seeing that we are still in the mid of this global crisis. Ma'am, my question to you is I think you are the best person to answer this question. That's why I'm asking you what happened to skilling of vulnerable youth in this COVID times?
Over times, what happens is that generally these vulnerable groups are the groups which get left out of any of the programs. For example, the speech and hearing impaired, what happens to them? They are not able to hear any videos which are put about health precautions, etc. So we had to do several sign language videos for them. We did a lot of support, which the ministers and others picked up and they put on their social media. But I think more importantly, what happens is that almost every youth, when our training centers closed down, they told us that these were the times they needed a job because they knew that their parents were marginal farmers, etc. They'll be losing their incomes in these hard times. So they said, please don't close your trainings. So what we did was we launched Youth for Job online. And before we launched, we spoke to companies, we spoke to youth with disabilities. We asked them how long should it be, what are the hours which are good. So all the stakeholders were involved in the launching. And the response was simply overwhelming. From 20 states of India, we launched, the youth began enrolling from all over India, including Jammu, Kashmir, remote parts of Northeast. The girls would quickly finish their work in the morning, and in the afternoon they would enroll. Mothers would come and ask, saying, "Ye kya ho raha hai? Why is my youth sitting on the phone the whole day?" And then the trainers would say, these are job link trained for your children. Make sure that they're listening and they do it properly. So the mothers, they spread the word around about our trainings. Uh, the markets had changed. We had to find new markets. But the impact of a job in COVID times, it's like magic. Okay, when you say a job, the kind of things these youth will do. So just to give you an example, just in COVID times, we must have at least put 300 speech and hearing impaired into a company like Amazon. So we've really worked in scale and used COVID as an opportunity with the use of technology. And that's something which I think anyone who understands the use of technology should try and do. Our struggles were because we were working with a very grassroots audience. They didn't know what Zoom is, they didn't know what Google is. So we first had to teach them how to use these platforms before we could do any coaching for them. And if the Wi-Fi was not there or the line was erratic, they would all go and stand near a shop where there was a better Wi-Fi to catch the signal. So we experimented with various things. We distributed smartphones. We raised money for phones. Okay. So all I want to say is that in these difficult times, we as a team and anyone who's in the development sector has to work much harder to make sure, because the impact of your work, is manifold, it doubles. And that then, if you take as your mission that you should not give up your hands in COVID time, but work twice as hard, it's really beautiful, Harsh.
Indeed, ma'am. As we know and very well understand that we are now living in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and unambiguous world. Ambiguous world. Ma'am, my question to you is: how do you see the future of employment? Is gig economy replacing traditional employment? What is the future workplace look like? Will gig economy drive the future of employment?
Yeah, personally, I don't think the gig economy will actually replace the traditional economy, but you do see some trends depending on the demand supply gap. I think, for example, even now you can see in the BPO industry, for example, where good trainers, there's a demand supply gap. Most of them don't want to work in a job, but they want to work part time, and they perhaps earn twice as much as they would earn if they are in a job. But I don't think this is necessarily everywhere. I think there's also a generational shift. I think most of the slightly older people want the safety of a job with a pension, while the millennials are willing to take a risk. They don't mind, doing these short-term jobs. However, I must say also the gig sometimes throws up a lot of work from home opportunities. So for people, for example, who have very severe disabilities and can't go out for work, Harsh, for those kind of people, we've been able to link them up to the part-time because they can't work longer also. So part-time work from home opportunities. However, I think some of the buzzwords which are going to remain in the future of the work are going to be automation, AI, robotics. I think these will all be the buzzwords of the future. And anyone and everyone will have to understand, digital literacy. And that's why there's a good emphasis, on that. Having said that, I think some of the good sides of automation automation in the future of the work will be perhaps some of the environmental impacts won't be there because perhaps the workplaces will become cleaner. But the flip side could also be the fact that this gig economy makes you work alone. Um, you could, a lot of the workplaces could be isolated the way it's having in COVID time. So you would see a lot of articles coming up on what is the future of work and the health issues associated going to be, because I think these are issues of uncertainty, of isolation, and therefore you have to look at new kind of issues in the future of work.
Indeed, ma'am. What I believe is that we can achieve the goal of Make in India only if we enhance our citizens' capability. Given our demographic composition, we must begin by empowering our youth. The 2014 National Youth Policy defined youth as a person between 15 and 29 years. This cohort accounted for 27.5% of this population. Then, the inspirational younger generation born after 1991 invariably hold the key to India's economic and political future. India has just declared a time to seize the opportunity and realize this youth demographic dividend. My question to you is, are we investing enough in our youth?
I think if you look at from the government's perspective, they are doing quite a lot. Skill India is the Honorable Prime Minister's prestigious program. You have the NSDC, you have the various ministries working on it. There's a big allocation of, I think, about 30,000 crore budget for that. There are the sector skill councils. Um, but I think despite all that, um, I think what is important is that everyone should work on this, because we all know this is being done because of the demographic dividend. We'll all have the youngest youth population who can, if skilled well, can serve not only India, but you can be a global workforce. So that being the case, I don't think we can leave it alone to the government to solve this issue, because the issue is very large. I think that individuals who feel strongly about this. For example, why do I work with youth? When I was in the government, I used to work with rural and tribal youth. Okay, now I work with youth with disabilities. I work with youth because if you begin working with them when they are about 18 or 20 years, you can influence them for the next 50 years of their life. Okay, yes, it's greater if you can also work in schools. Okay, because then you have a larger influence on their life. But a job really has a tremendous influence on the next 50 years of their life. So I think that whether it's companies, whether it's not-for-profit organizations, whether it's civil society, I think we all cannot leave such important problems like youth to the government alone. We all need to come together, and partnering with the government has a very large advantage, because no one can have the last mile connect to remote villages the way the government has. So always what people like us do is that we make sure that wherever we are, we talk about our work to the government and see how we can partner with them in any way. If we don't do this, I think the country will lose a large opportunity, and the demographic dividend can actually become, as the economists say, a demographic disaster. So it's good that all of us work together to invest in youth.
Indeed, ma'am. So there's a lot more to learn from you, and I can say there's a lot more to discuss with you. But today I don't want to take too much of your time. So moving to my last question of this session, ma'am. Actually, this question is not very much close to the topic, but actually I'm actually involving this. It is related to this entrepreneurship kind of thing. Any career path requires training, whether you are an accountant, an office manager, or an airline pilot. Becoming an entrepreneur is no different. The skill required to be good at entrepreneurship are not exclusive. They can be applied to almost any field of work, even if you are working for any corporate job too. My question to you is, do you support the idea of entrepreneurial teaching as a part of higher education?
I think it's a good thing to do as long as you can make it a lot of fun. You know, I've seen schools in the West, for example, where the kids in the summer holidays they're given assignments in the entrepreneurial education course, taught simple business exercises. You know, I think what it does is most importantly, as you grow up, it gives you an option in life. You know that there are two options. You can actually set up something of your own, or you can choose to work in a job. So it prepares you for the future of your life. In that way, I think it's important. I also definitely think that an entrepreneurial education gives certain skills. It helps you to build your leadership skills. It helps you to look at problems and see how to solve them, because finally that's what being an entrepreneur is. Constantly you're faced with a problem and you have to solve it. So I think when you're young, you begin thinking about these issues, which generally we tend to, do it only when you're doing your MBA or something. So I think that it hones you, it helps you to think in different manners. And I definitely think it's impossible. It's important because it helps you, as I said, most importantly, gives you a different walk of life, which you can, if you like it, then, you can be an entrepreneur from a very young age.
Indeed, ma'am. So can we conclude that the very simple and obvious answer is yes?
Yes. Yes.
All right, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining and giving your important time. It was a very healthy discussion with you on the topic. We look forward to conduct more such sessions with you in the future. Thank you, ma'am, for joining and giving your important time.
Thank you, Harsh. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
On the ground is where I stand. Never give up, that was always the plan. It's so cold outside, I'm alone, I'm alright. It's so cold outside, I'm alone.